Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Susie of Gemini Connect, and today I am here with yet another third-party lens for you to consider for your Sony mirrorless camera. This is the Sigma 45mm f2.8 lens, and it was launched in July of 2019. It's available as two mounts, as an E-mount for Sony mirrorless cameras such as this A7R III here, or as an L mount. And the L mount is of particular interest because it's a brand new mount and it's part of the alliance between Panasonic full-frame cameras, Leica full-frame cameras, and Sigma's own upcoming L mount cameras. In fact, as of this moment, this is the smallest L mount lens available. But again, we're going to see a lot more L mount lenses, so it's worth keeping an eye on those if you shoot Panasonic full-frame, Leica full-frame, or you're interested in Sigma's upcoming full-frame mirrorless camera line. But I have here with me the E-mount version of this lens, and I have paired it with my Sony A7R III, and I have it on loan to test it out and see what I think. And my first impressions so far are the visual design of this lens. Just looking at it, it is really hard not to notice that there was a lot of thought put into the design. In contrast, here is the Sony 55mm f1.8 lens. This is my go-to prime lens that pretty much lives on my Sony A7R III if I don't already have the 24-70 lens on it. And I love this lens. It is super sharp, performs really well, but as you can see, it's not terribly interesting in terms of design. And that is where Sigma takes a totally different direction. In fact, I think that Sigma is borrowing a lot of design from Fujifilm. This is the 35mm f2 lens for Fujifilm crop sensor cameras. Now, one of the reasons why people love Fujifilm cameras and lenses is because of the design. So I think it's a really smart move for Sigma to borrow some of the design elements from Fujifilm lenses. If you hold these two lenses together, you'll see that they both have these front rings that can twist to manipulate your focus if you're shooting in manual focus, and there's also a ring in the back to control aperture. Now, the Fujifilm lens does not have a switch to toggle between autofocus and manual focus, but the Sigma lens does. Another similarity between these two lenses is that with this 45mm lens, you are now using that aperture ring to select your aperture. Now, I do shoot with the Fujifilm X-T3 quite often, so when I'm shooting with the Fujifilm, I've gotten used to using an aperture ring, but I do find that there's still something that's really difficult about getting used to using the aperture ring with Sony. I'm just so used to using my thumb or my front forefinger to select my aperture, and it's taken a lot of getting used to switch to using the aperture ring with this lens. But with that said, it's a really nice throwback and results in a really nice design for the lens. Another design element of the Sigma lens that I really like is that it is made of all metal, and that includes this removable lens hood up front. And because it's made of all metal, there is some weather sealing, so this is a lens that can be used in maybe some light showers outside, though I wouldn't take it into a full-on thunderstorm. Besides design, this is a really great lens, and I think it pairs really nicely with the Sony A7R III in particular. You can use it on a crop sensor camera such as the A6000, the A6300, or any of those cameras, but you don't get the 45mm range. And speaking of that, that is one of the features I love about Sony full-frame cameras, is that if you have a camera like the A7R III or the A7 III, you can choose between shooting in full-frame or crop sensor mode. And by doing that, you essentially get two different focal lengths out of a lens like this prime lens. Now, of course, that zoomed in crop sensor image is going to be a little bit smaller, and that's where it's more beneficial to be shooting with the A7R III. But in terms of performance, I think that this lens just feels like a native lens, and it actually looks a lot better than Sony's own native lenses. And at this point, so many of the third-party brands such as Tamron and Sigma have made their mirrorless lenses so compatible with cameras such as the A7R III that it's no longer an issue that these are third-party lenses. You won't really notice a difference in terms of performance. But now that we've talked about some positives, I think there are two elephants in the room that we should discuss. The first one has to do with the fact that this is only an f2.8 lens, and that might come as a bit of a surprise to some of us that are used to shooting with f1.8 or f1.4 or f1.2 lenses. This is a reasonably fast lens, but it's not super fast. And that means that if you're shooting in really low light situations, f2.8 may not be fast enough, and you might prefer something like an f1.8 or f1.4 lens. But of course, f1.8 and f1.4 lenses generally are more expensive. So you are making a bit of a trade-off by going with a f2.8 lens. And just because this is an f2.8 lens doesn't mean that the bokeh or the blurred background is lacking. In fact, there is a minimum focusing distance of 9.4 inches. So if you get pretty close to your subject, you can still have a really nice bokeh effect that you also get with some of the faster lenses. The second thing to address is the price. This is a rather expensive lens. It costs $549 US. And for a f2.8 lens, honestly, that's a lot of money. In fact, I'd love to hear from you about what you think about that, because I'm a little torn. I think it's really nice that this is a nicely designed lens that is all metal and really solid, and it pairs really nicely with a camera like my Sony mirrorless. But I do think it's really expensive, and I do question if it's worth the money, especially when some of Sony's own E-Mount lenses, which are notoriously expensive, are actually a little bit cheaper. You can get a Sony full-frame 50mm f1.8 for about $200. So it's a faster lens that might be a little bit more zoomed in, but you know, it's a lot cheaper as well. So for Sony E-Mount users, I do think that this lens is going to be for a very particular person who is maybe more focused on the design aspects, because there are cheaper lenses made by Sony that are available. Now for anyone using the L-mount system, I think that that's where this lens starts to get really interesting. Because again, this is one of the first lenses available for the L-mount, and as of right now, it's actually the smallest lens. So if Sigma continues with this trend of making their L-mount lenses pretty compact and all metal, then you're going to have a nice range of lenses to choose from. However, the price point does make you a little bit cautious about the fact that those lenses are probably going to cost pretty close to what Sony lenses are costing. So thank you, Sony, for setting a really high price point for all the mirrorless camera lenses out there. But all joking aside, I really do love the look and feel of this lens. I think it's balanced really well with a bigger camera such as the Sony a7R III, and the image quality and video quality are really crisp. And one other thing worth mentioning is that this focal length of 45mm f2.8 might seem a little bit odd, but I actually have the 40mm f2.8 pancake lens that I've used with my Canon DSLRs. And what I loved about this lens is that it is so tiny as a pancake lens. It makes even the biggest full-frame camera look really cute and tiny. And so this was a really great travel camera. I took this exact setup to Thailand, did a lot of street and travel photography, and no one even looked twice at the fact that I had this full-frame DSLR because of this lens being so tiny. And so I have used a very similar focal length. f2.8 is still really fast if you have enough daylight. So will I be buying this lens? Probably not, and that again is because I'm already invested in the 55mm f1.8 lens, which I absolutely love, even though it is about double the price. For me, because I shoot in a lot of low lighting scenarios, f1.8 is just essential, and so I really need a faster prime lens, and I've already made that upfront investment. I also shoot a lot with the 24-70 f2.8 lens, so in that sense, 45mm f2.8 is rather redundant, so it's not a lens that I need for my kit. However, if you've been shooting with a kit lens or a zoom lens and you want a smaller, more compact, really well designed and well built lens, I would look at this 45mm to add it to your collection. But now I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Is this a lens that you would consider buying? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.